Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraet Nashte Prayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Chapter 17 of Canto 10, the history of Kaliya. This chapter summary. This chapter describes how Kaliya left the island of the snakes and how the sleeping residents of Vrindavan were saved from a forest fire. When King Parikshit inquired about Kaliya's leaving Ramanaka island, the abode of the serpents and about why Garuda acted inimically toward him, Sri Shukadeva Goswami replied as follows. All the serpents on the island were afraid of being devoured by Garuda. To placate him, every month they would leave various offerings for him at the foot of a banyan tree. But Kaliya, puffed up as he was with false pride, would eat these offerings himself. Hearing of this, Garuda became furious and went to kill Kaliya, whereupon the snake began biting the great bird. Garuda fiercely beat him with his wing, sending Kaliya fleeing for his life to a lake adjoining the Yamuna river. Prior to the incident above, Garuda had once come to the Yamuna and started eating some fish. Shobari Rishi had tried to stop him, but Garuda, agitated by hunger, had refused to heed the sage's prohibitions. And in response, the sage had cursed Garuda that if he ever came there again, he would immediately die. Kaliya had heard of this, and thus he lived there without fear. In the end, however, he was driven out by Sri Krishna. When Lord Balaram and all the residents of Vrindavan saw Sri Krishna rise up out of the lake, beautifully decorated with many different gems and ornaments, they embraced him in great pleasure. The spiritual masters, priests, and learned brahmanas then told Nanda Maharaj, the king of the cowherds, that although his son had been caught in the grips of Kaliya, it was by the king's good fortune that he was now free again. Because the people of Vrindavan were quite worn out by hunger, thirst, and fatigue, they spent the night on the banks of the Yamuna. In the middle of the night, a fire happened to blaze up within the forest, which had become dry during the hot season. As the fire surrounded the sleeping inhabitants of Vrindavan, they suddenly awoke and rushed to Sri Krishna for protection. Then the unlimitedly powerful Lord Sri Krishna, seeing his dear relatives and friends so distressed, immediately swallowed up the terrible forest fire. Shri Rajo Vacha Nagalayam Ramanakam Katham Tatyaja Kaliya Kritam Kim Vasuparnasya Tene Kena Samanjasam. Having thus heard how Lord Krishna chastised Kaliya, King Parikshit inquired, why did Kaliya leave Ramanaka island, the abode of the serpents, and why did Garuda become so antagonistic toward him alone? Shri Shiko Vacha Upaharya Sarpa Janair Basi Masi Hayo Bali Manaspatyo Mahabaho Nagana Prani Rupita Swam Swam Bhagam Prayachanti Naga Pravan Parvani Gopithayatmana Sarve Suparnaya Mahatmane. Shukadeva Goswami said, to avoid being eaten by Garuda, the serpents had previously made an arrangement with him whereby they would each make a monthly offering of tribute at the base of a tree. Thus every month on Shadul, Almighty armed King Parikshit, each serpent would duly make his offering to that powerful carrier of Vishnu as a purchase of protection. Srila Sridhar Swami has given an alternate explanation of this verse. Upaharya may also be translated as by those who are to be eaten, and Sharpajane as those human beings who were dominated or who belong to the serpent race. According to this reading, a group of human beings had fallen under the control of the serpents and were prone to be eaten by them. To avoid this, the human beings would make a monthly offering to the serpents, who in turn would offer a portion of that offering to Garuda, so that he would not eat them. The particular translation given above is based on the commentary of Srila Sanatana Goswami and the translation by Srila Prabhupada and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In any case, all the acharyas agree that the serpents purchase protection from Garuda. Vishavidya Madhavishta Kadraveyastu Kaliya kadarthi kritya garudam swayam tam bubuje balim. Although all the other serpents were dutifully making offerings to Garuda, one serpent, the arrogant Kaliya, son of Kadru, would eat all these offerings before Garuda could claim them. Thus Kaliya directly defied the carrier of Lord Vishnu. Tat Shrutva Kupito Rajan Bhagavan Bhagavat Priya Vijighamsur Mahavega Kaliyam Samapadravat. O king, the greatly powerful Garuda, who was very dear to the Supreme Lord, became angry when he heard of this. Desiring to kill Kaliya, he rushed toward the serpent with tremendous speed. Srila Sanatana Goswami explains that the word Mahavega indicates that the great speed of Garuda cannot be checked by anyone. Tam apatantam tarasa vishayuda pratyabhyayad uttita naika mastaka dadbhi suparnam vyadashad dadayudaha karala jivochva sitogra lochana. As Garuda swiftly fell upon him, Kaliya, who had the weapon of poison, raised his numerous heads to counterattack. Showing his ferocious tongues and expanding his horrible eyes, Kaliya then bit Garuda with the weapons of his fangs. The Acharyas explain that Kaliya used the weapon of poison at a distance by spitting venom upon his enemy and at a short range by biting him with his terrible fangs. Tam taksha putra sanarasya manyun man prachanda vego madhusudhanasana pakshena savyena hiranya rochisa jaghana kadru sutam ugra vikrama. The angry son of Taksha moved with overwhelming speed in repelling Kaliya's attack. That terribly powerful carrier of Lord Madhusudana struck the son of Kadru with his left wing, which shone like gold. Supurna paksha hata kalyotiva vihvala radam viveshak kalindyas tad agamyam durasadam. Beaten by Garuda's wing, Kaliya was extremely distraught, and thus he took shelter of a lake adjoining the river Yamuna. Garuda could not enter this lake. Indeed, he could not even approach it. Tatraikada jala charam garudo bhakshyam ipsitam nivarita sobharina prasahya kshudito harat. In the very lake, Garuda had once desired to eat a fish. Fish being, after all, his normal food, although forbidden by the sage Sobhari, who was meditating there within the water. Garuda took courage and, feeling hungry, seized the fish. Shukadeva Goswami is now explaining why Garuda could not approach the lake in the Yamuna river. It is the nature of birds to eat fish, and thus, by the arrangement of the Lord, the great bird Garuda does not commit any offense by nourishing himself with fish. On the other hand, Shobhari Muni's forbidding a greater personality to eat his normal food did constitute an offense. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Shobhari committed two offenses. First, he dared to give an order to a supremely exalted soul like Garuda, and second, he obstructed Garuda from satisfying his desire. Minansu dukkitan drashtva dinan mina pato hate kripaya Shobhari praha tat Seeing how the unfortunate fish in that lake had become most unhappy at the death of their leader, Sobhari uttered the following curse, and under the impression that he was mercifully acting for the benefit of the lake's residents. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that when our so-called compassion does not tally with the order of the Supreme Lord, it merely causes a disturbance. Because Sobhari had forbidden Garuda's coming to that lake, Kaliya moved in and made his headquarters there, and this spell doom for all the lake's residents. Atra pravishya garudo yadi matsyan sakhadati sadya pranay viyujyeta satyameta bravimyaham. If Garuda ever again enters this lake and eats the fish here, he will immediately lose his life. What I am saying is the truth. The Acharyas explain in this regard that because of Shobhari Muni's material attachment and affection for a fish, he failed to see the situation from the spiritual viewpoint. The ninth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam describes his fall down for this offense because of false pride. Shobhari Muni lost his power of austerity and with it his spiritual beauty and happiness. When Garuda came to the Yamuna, Shobhari Muni thought, although he may be a personal associate of the Supreme Lord, I will still curse him and even kill him if he disobeys my order. Such an offensive attitude against an exalted Vaishnava will certainly destroy one's auspicious position in life. As the ninth canto describes, Shobhari Muni married many beautiful women and suffered greatly in their association. But because he had once become glorious by taking shelter of the Yamuna river in Sri Vrindavan, he was ultimately delivered. Tatkaliya param veda nanya kaschana leliha avatsid garudad bhita krishnena cha vivasita. Of all the serpents, only Kaliya came to know of this affair, and in fear of Garuda, he took up residence in that Yamuna lake. Later, Lord Krishna drove him out. Krishnam hradad vinishkrantam divya sarg shragandavasasam mahamani gana kirnam jambunada parikshkritam upalabhyatita sarve labda prana ivasava Ramoda nibhritatmano gopa pritya bhire bhire. Resuming his description of Krishna's chastisement of Kaliya, Shukadeva Goswami continued, Krishna rose up out of the lake wearing divine garlands, fragrances and garments covered with many fine jewels and decorated with gold. When the cowards saw him, they all stood up immediately, just like an unconscious person's senses coming back to life. Filled with great joy, they affectionately embraced him. Yashoda Rohini Nando Gopya Gopascha Kaurava Krishnam Sametya Labdeha Asan Suksha Naga Api. Having regained their vital functions, Yashoda, Rohini, Nanda, and all the other cowherd women and men went up to Krishna. O descendant of Kuru, even the dried up trees came back to life. Ramaschchutam Alingya Jahasasyanubhavavit Premnatam Ankam Aropya Punar Punar Udaikshata Gavo Vrisha Vatsataryo Lebhire Paramamudam. Lord Balaram embraced his infallible brother and laughed, knowing well the extent of Krishna's potency. Out of great feelings of love, Balaram lifted Krishna on his lap and repeatedly looked at him. The cows, bulls, and young female calves also achieved the highest pleasure. Nandam Vipra Samakatya Guravasa Kalatraka Uchuste Kaliya Grashto Dishtya Muktastavatmaja. All the respectable brahmanas, together with their wives, came forward to greet Nanda Maharaj. They said to him, Your son was in the grips of Kaliya, but by the grace of the providence, he is now free. Dehi danam dvi jatinam Krishna nirmukti hetave Nanda prita mana rajan Gasuvarnam tadadishat. The brahmanas then advised Nanda Maharaj to sure that your son Krishna will always be free from danger, should give charity to the brahmanas. With a satisfied mind, O king, Nanda Maharaj then very gladly gave them gifts of cows and gold. Yashodapi mahabhaga nashtalabda prajasati parishvajyankam aropya mumochashru kalamuhu. The greatly fortunate mother Yashoda, having lost her son and then regained him, placed him on her lap. The chaste lady cried constantly torrents of tears as she repeatedly embraced him. Tam ratrin tatra rajendra kshutribhyam shrama karshita ushur rajo kashogava kalindya upakulata. O best of the kings, Parikshit, because of the residents of Vrindavan were feeling very weak from hunger, thirst and fatigue, they and the cows spent the night there where they were, lying down near the bank of the Kalindi. Sri Jiva Goswami points out that although the people were weak from hunger and thirst, they did not drink the milk from the cows present there because they feared it had been contaminated by the serpent's poison. The residents of Vrindavan were so overjoyed to get back to their beloved Krishna that they did not want to go back to their houses. They wanted to stay with Krishna on the bank of the Yamuna so they could continuously see him. Thus they decided to take rest near the river bank. Tada suchi vanod bhuto davagni sarvato vrajam suptam nishita avritya pradagdhum upachakrame. During the night, while all the people of Vrindavan were asleep, a great fire blazed within the dry summer forest. The fire surrounded the inhabitants of Raj on all sides and began to scorch them. Sri Sanatan Goswami and Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur have commented that perhaps a loyal friend of Kaliya had assumed the form of a forest fire to avenge his friend, or perhaps the forest fire was manifest by a demon who was a follower of Kamsa's. Tata uthaya sambranta dahyamana vrajaukasha krishnam yayuste sharanam maya manujam ishwaram. Then the residents of Vrindavan woke up extremely disturbed by the great fire threatened to burn them. Thus they took shelter of Krishna, the Supreme Lord, who by his spiritual potency appeared like an ordinary human being. The Shruti, or the Vedic mantra, states, Swarupya Bhutaya Nitya Shaktya Maya Khyaya. The Lord's eternal potency named Maya is innate in his original form. Thus within the eternal spiritual body of the Supreme Lord, there is infinite potency, which effortlessly manipulates all existence according to the omniscient desire of the Absolute Truth. The residents of Vrindavan took shelter of Krishna, thinking, this blessed boy will certainly be empowered by God to save us. They remembered the words of the sage Garga Muni spoken at the birth ceremony of Lord Krishna. Anena sarva durgani yuyam agnyas tarishyata. By his power, you will easily be able to cross over all obstacles. Therefore, the residents of Vrindavan, who had full faith in Krishna, took shelter of the Lord in hopes of being saved from the impending disaster threatened by the forest fire. Krishna Krishna Mahabhaga He Rama Mita Vikrama Esha Ghoratamo Vahnis Tavakan Grasate Hina. Vrindavan residents said, Krishna Krishna, O Lord of all opulence, O Rama, possessor of unlimited power, this most terrible fire is about to devour us, your devotees. Sudustarana swan pahi kalagne suhrida prabho na shaknumastva charanam santyaktum akuto bhayam. O Lord, we are your true friends and devotees. Please protect us from this insurmountable fire of death. We can never give up your lotus feet, which drive away all fear. The residents of Vrindavan told Krishna, if this deadly fire overcomes us, we will be separated from your lotus feet, and this is unbearable for us. Therefore, just so that we can go on serving your lotus feet, please protect us. Itam swajana vaiklavyam niriksha jagadishvara tamagnim apibativram ananto ananta shakti drik. Seeing his devotees so disturbed, Sri Krishna, the infinite Lord of the universe and possessor of infinite power, then swallowed the terrible forest fire. Thus ends the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada to the 10th canto, 17th chapter, the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The History of Kaliya. Chapter 18. Lord Balaram slays the demon Pralamba. Chapter summary. The killing of Pralambasura is described in this chapter. While playing happily in Vrindavan, Lord Baladev climbed up on the shoulders of the demon Pralamba and struck his head with his fist, destroying him. Sri Vrindavan, where Krishna and Balaram enacted their pastimes, was even during the summer decorated with all of the qualities of spring. At that time, Lord Sri Krishna would become absorbed in various sports, surrounded by Balaram and all the cowherd boys. One day they were intently dancing, singing, and playing when a demon named Pralamba entered their midst, disguised as a cowherd boy. The omniscient Lord, Krishna, saw through the disguise, but even as he thought of how to kill the demon, he treated him as a friend. Krishna then suggested to his young friends and Baladev that they play a game involving contending parties. Taking the role of leaders, Krishna and Balaram divided the boys into two groups and determined that the losers would have to carry the winners on their shoulders. Thus, when Sridama, Rishabha, the members of Balaram's party, were victorious, Krishna and another boy in the party carried them on their shoulders. Pralambasura thought that the unconquerable Lord Sri Krishna would be too great an opponent to contend with. So the demon fought with Balaram instead and was defeated. Taking Lord Balaram on his back, Pralambasura began to walk away very swiftly. But Balaram became as heavy as Mount Sumeru. The demon, unable to carry him, had to reveal his true demoniac form. When Balaram saw this terrible form, he struck the demon a ferocious blow on the head of his fist with his fist. This blow shattered Pralambasura's head, just as lightning bolts hurled by the king of the demigods shattered mountains. The demon repeatedly vomited blood and then fell upon the ground. When the coward boys saw Lord Balaram return, they joyfully embraced and congratulated him as the demigods showered garlands of flowers from the heavens and glorified him. Shri Shukha Vacha Ata Krishna Parivritto Jnatibhir Muditatmabhi Anugiyamananya Visad Vrajam Gokula Manditam. Shukadeva Goswami said, surrounded by his blissful companions who constantly chanted his glories, Shri Krishna then entered the village of Vrindavan, which is decorated with herds of cows. Vraje Vikridato Revam Gopala Chadma Mayaya Grishmo Namartur Abhavan Nati Preyan Sharirinam. While Krishna and Balaram were thus enjoying life in Vrindavan in the guise of ordinary cowherd boys, the summer season gradually appeared. This season is not very pleasing to the embodied souls. In the chapter 18 of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada comments as follows: the summer season in India is not very much welcome because of the excessive heat, but in Vrindavan everyone was pleased because summer there appeared just like spring. Sacha Vrindavana Gunair Vasanta Iva Lakshita Yatraste Bhagavan Sakshad Ramena Saha Keshava. Nevertheless, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead was personally staying in Vrindavan along with Balaram, summer manifested the qualities of springs. Such are the features of the land of Vrindavan. Yatra nirjhara nirhrada nivritta swana chillikam shashvata chikararjisha druma mandala manditam. In Vrindavan, the loud sound of waterfalls covered the crickets' noise, and clusters of trees constantly moistened by spray from those waterfalls beautified the entire area. This and the following three verses describe how Vrindavan manifested the features of spring even during the summer season. Sharitsara prasavarnormi vayuna kahlara kanjotpalarenu harina na vidyate yatra vanokasam Davo nidagava nyarka bhavoti sadvale. The winds wafting over the waves of the lakes and flowering rivers carried away the pollen of many varieties of lotuses and water lilies and then cooled the entire Vrindavan area. Thus the residents there did not suffer from the heat generated by the blazing summer sun and seasonal forest fires. Indeed, Vrindavan was abundant with fresh green grass. Agadatoya radini tator mibhir dravat purishya pulinay samantata nayatra chandamsu karavisolvana bhuvorasam sat shadvalitam chakrinate. With their flowering waves, the deep rivers stretched their banks, making them damp and muddy. Thus the rays of the sun, which were as fierce as poison, could not evaporate the earth's sap or parch its green grass. Vana kusumita shriman nadat chitra mriga dvijam gayan mayura maram kujat kokila sarasam. Flowers beautifully decorated the forests of Vrindavan, and many varieties of animals, birds, filled it with sound. The peacocks and bees sang, and the cuckoos and cranes cooed. Kridishyamanas tat Krishno Bhagavan Bala Samyuta Vinum Viranayan Gopair Godhaner Samvrito Vishat. Intending to engage in the pastimes, Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, accompanied by Lord Balaram and surrounded by cowherd boys and cows, entered the forest of Vrindavan as he played his flute. Pravala Bharhas Tabaka Shragdhatu Krita Bhushana Rama Krishna Dayo Gopa Nandritur Yuyudhur Jagu, decorating themselves with newly grown leaves along with peacock feathers, garlands, clusters of flower buds, and color minerals. Balram, Krishna, and their cowherd friends danced, wrestled, and sang. Krishnasya nrityata kechij jago kechid avadayan venu pani talay shringair prasasam sur athapare. As Krishna danced, some of the boys accompanied him by singing, and others by playing flutes, hand cymbals, and buffalo horns, while still others praised his dancing. Wanting to encourage Sri Krishna, some of the cowherd boys openly praised his dancing. Gopajati prati channa deva gopala rupino idare Krishna ramaucha nata iva nata nripa. O king, demigods disguise themselves as members of the cowherd community, and just as dramatic dancers praise another dancer, worship Krishna and Balaram, who were also appearing as cowherd boys. Brahmanay langhanay kshepay ashphotana vikarshanay chikrida datur niyudhena kakapaksha daro kvachit. Krishna and Balaram played with their cowherd boyfriends by whirling about, leaping, hurling, slapping, and fighting. Sometimes Krishna and Balaram would pull their hair on the boy's head. The acharyas have explained this verse as follows. The word Brahmane indicates that the boys, pretending they were machines, would sometimes whirl about until they became dizzy. They would also sometimes jump about Langane. The word Shepaye indicates that sometimes they would hurl objects like balls or stones, and that sometimes they would grab each other by arms and throw one another about. Aspotana means that sometimes they would slap one another's shoulders or backs, and Vikarshane indicates they would drag one another about in the midst of their play. By the word Niyudhina, arm wrestling, and other types of friendly fighting are indicated, and the word Kakapakshadharo means that Krishna and Balaram would sometimes grab the hair of the boys' heads in a playful manner. Kvachin nrityatsu chanyeshu gayako vadako swayam sasham satur maharaja sadhu swadviti vadino. While the other boys were dancing, O king, Krishna and Balaram would sometimes accompany them with song and instrumental music. Sometimes the two lords would praise the boys, saying, "Very good, very good." Kvachit bilvai kvachit kumbhai Kvacha malaka mushtibi asprishya netra bandhadyai kvachin mriga khagehaya. Sometimes the cowherd boys would play with bilva or kumbha fruits, and sometimes with handfuls of amalaka fruits. At other times they would play games of trying to touch one another, or of trying to identify somebody while one is blindfolded, or sometimes they would imitate animals and birds. Srila Sanatana Goswami explains the word adhyay. By others, such sports indicates such games as chasing one another and building bridges. Another pastime would occur at noon while Krishna was taking rest. Nearby, the young cowherd girls would be passing by singing, and Krishna's boyfriends would pretend to inquire from them about the price of milk. Then the boys would steal yogurt and other items from them and run away. Krishna, Balaram, and their friends would also play games in which they would cross in the river in boats. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur further explains that the boys would play with fruits by throwing a few in the air and then throwing others to try to hit them. The word Netrabandha indicates a game in which one boy would approach a blindfolded boy from behind and place his palms over the blindfolded boy's eyes. Then simply by the feel of his palms, the blindfolded boy would have to guess who the other boy was. In all such games, the boys would put up sticks for the winners, such as flutes or walking sticks. Sometimes the boys would imitate the various fighting methods of the forest animals, and at other times they would chirp like birds. Kvachit dura plavair vividhair upahasakhay kadachit syandolikaya karhichinripacheshtaya. They would sometimes jump around like frogs, sometimes play various jokes, sometimes ride in swings, and sometimes imitate monarchs. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains the word Nripacheshtaya as follows. In Vrindavan, there was a particular place on the river bank where people who wanted to cross the Yamuna would pay a small tax. At times, the cowherd boys would assemble in the area and prevent the young girls of Vrindavan crossing the river, and insisting that they had to pay a customs duty first. Such activities were full of joking and laughter. एवं तो लोकसिद्धाभिः क्रीडाभिश्चेरतुर्वणैर्नद्याद्रिद्रोणिकुञ्जेषु काननेषु सहस्रासु च. In this way, Krishna and Balaram played all sorts of well-known games as they wandered among the rivers, hills, valleys, bushes, trees, and lakes of Vrindavan. Pashumscharayator gopais tadvane Ramakrishnayo goparumpi pralambhogad asurastaj dihirshaya. While Rama, Krishna, and their cowherd friends were thus tending the cows in that Vrindavan forest, the demon Pralamba entered their midst. He had assumed the form of a cowherd boy with the intention of kidnapping Krishna and Balaram. Having described how Krishna and Balaram acted just like ordinary boys, Shukadeva Goswami will now reveal one of the Lord's transcendental pastimes that is beyond the range of human activity. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the demon Pralamba disguised himself as a particular cowherd boy who on that day had remained at home with duties to perform. Tam vidvanapi dasarho bhagavan sarvadarshana anvamodata tat sakhyam vadham tasya vichintayan. Since the Supreme Lord Krishna, who had appeared in the Dasharha dynasty, sees everything, he understood who the demon was. Still, the Lord pretending to accept the demon as a friend, while at the same time seriously considering how to kill him. Tatra pahuya gopalan Krishna praha viharavit he gopavi harishyamo dvibhuya yathayatam. Krishna, who knows all sports and games, then called together the cowherd boys and spoke as follows. Hey cowherd boys, let's play now. We'll divide ourselves into two even teams. The word yathayatam means that Krishna naturally wanted the two teams to be evenly matched so that there would be a good game. In addition to the pleasure of sporting, the purpose of the game was to kill the demon Pralamba. Tatta chakru parivridho goparama janardhano Krishna sanghatina kechit asan ramasya chapare. The cowherd boys chose Krishna and Balaram as the leaders of the two parties. Some of the boys were on Krishna's side and others joined Balaram. Acherur vividha krida vahya vahaka lakshana yatra rohani jetaro vahanti cha parajita. The boys played various games involving carriers and passengers. In these games, the winners would climb on the backs of the losers who would have to carry them. Srinathan Goswami quotes the following relevant verse from the Vishnu Purana. Harina Kridanam Nama Bala Kridanakam Tatha Prakridata Hite Sarve Dvau Dvau Yugapad Utpatan. They then played the childhood game known as Harina Kridanam, in which each boy is paired off with an opponent and all the boys simultaneously attack their respective rivals. Vahano Vahyamanascha Charayantascha Godhanam Bhandirakam Namavatam Jagmu Krishna Purogama. Thus carrying and being carried by one another at the same time tending the cows, the boys followed Krishna to a banyan tree known as Bhandiraka. Srila Sanatana Goswami quotes the following verses from Sri Harivamsha, which describe the banyan tree. Tadarsha Vipulo Dagra Sakhinam Varam Sitam Dharanyam Meghabham Nibidam Dala Sanchaya Gaganardho Sritakaram Parvata Bhogadharinam Nila Chitranga Varnaischa Sevitam Bahubhiskagay Falay Pravalaischa Gane Sendra Chapa Ghanopamam Bhavanakara Vitapam Lata Pushpa Sumanditam Vishalamulavatam Pavanam Bodhadharinam Adhipatyam Ivan Yesham Tasya Deshasya Sakhinam Kurvanam Subhakarmanam Niravarsham Anatapam Nyagrodam Pravatagrabham Bhandiram Nama Namata. They saw that best of all trees, which had many long branches, with its dense covering of leaves, it resembled a cloud sitting on the earth. Indeed, its form was so large that it appeared like a mountain covering half the sky. Many birds with charming blue wings frequented that great tree, whose dense fruits and leaves made it seem like a cloud accompanied by a rainbow, or like a house decorated with creepers and flowers. It spread its broad roots downwards and carried upon itself the sanctified clouds. That banyan tree was like the lordly master of all the other trees in that vicinity, as it performed the all-auspicious functions of warding off rain and heat of the sun. Such was the appearance of the Nyagroda tree known as Bhandira, which seemed just like the peak of a great mountain. Rama Sanghatino Yarhi Sridama Vrishabhadaya Kridayam Jaina Stamstan Uhu Krishna Dayo Nripa. My dear King Parikshit, when Sridama Vrishabha and the other members of Lord Balaram's party were victorious in these games, Krishna and his followers had to carry them. Uvaha Krishna Bhagavan Sridamanam Parajita Vishrabham Bhadrasenastu Pralambo Rohini Sutam. Defeated, the Supreme Lord Krishna carried Sridama, Bhadrasena carried Vrishabha, and Pralamba carried Balaram, the son of Rohini. One may ask how Bhagavan, the Supreme Lord, can be defeated by his boyfriends. The answer is that in his original form, Lord has a most playful nature and occasionally enjoys submitting to the strength or desires of his loving friends. A father may sometimes playfully fall down on the ground when struck by his beloved little child. These acts of love give pleasure to all parties. Thus Sridama agreed to ride on Krishna's shoulders to please his beloved friend, who happened to be Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Avishahyam Manyamana Krishnam Danava Pungava Vahan Druttattaram Pragad Avarohanata Param. Considering Lord Krishna invincible, the foremost demon Pralamba quickly carried Brahma far beyond the spot where he was supposed to put his passenger down. Pralamba wanted to carry Balaram out of Lord Krishna's sight so that he could cruelly attack him. Tam udvahan dharendra gauravam mahasuro vigatarayo nijam vapu sa astita purata parichhado babhu tadidyuman udupati vad ivambuda. As a great demon carried Balaram, the Lord became as heavy as massive Mount Sumeru, and Pralamba had to slow down. He then resumed his actual form, an effulgent body that was covered with gold ornaments that resembled a cloud flashing with lightning and carrying the moon. Here the demon Pralamba is compared to a cloud, his golden ornaments to lightning within that cloud, and Lord Balaram to the moon shining through it. Great demons can assume various forms, like exerting mystic power. But when the Lord's spiritual potency curtails their power, they can no longer maintain an artificial form and must again manifest their actual demoniac body. Lord Balaram suddenly became as heavy as a great mountain, and although the demon tried to carry him high on his shoulders, he could not go on. Nirikshitadvapuralamambare charat pradipta drigbrukuti tatodgradamstrakam jwalachikam kataka kirita kundala tvisadbhutam haladharaishad atra sat. When Lord Balaram, who carries the plow weapon, saw the gigantic body of the demon as he moved swiftly in the sky, with his blazing eyes, fiery hair, terrible teeth reaching toward his scowling brows, and an amazing effulgence generated by his armlets, crown, and earrings, the Lord seemed to become a little frightened. Srila Sanatana Goswami explains Lord Baladev's so-called fear as follows. Balaram was playfully acting out the role of an ordinary coward boy, and to maintain the mood of this pastime, he appeared slightly disturbed by the horrible demoniac body. Also, because the demon had appeared as a coward boyfriend of Krishna's, and because Krishna had accepted him as a friend, Baladev was rightly apprehensive about killing him. Balaram could also have been worried that since this coward boy was actually a demon in disguise, at that very moment another such demon might have been attacking Lord Krishna himself. Thus the omniscient and omnipotent Supreme Lord Balaram exhibited the pastime of becoming slightly nervous in the presence of the horrible demon Pralamba. Athagata smritirabhayo ripumbalo vihaya sarthamiva hantaram atmana rushahana chirasi dridhena mustina suradhipo girimiva vajraramhasa. Remembering the actual situation, the fearless Balaram understood that the demon was trying to kidnap him and take him away from his companions. The Lord then became furious and struck the demon's head with his hard fist, just as Indra, the king of demigods, strikes a mountain with his thunderbolt weapon. Lord Balaram's powerful fist came crashing down upon the demon's head, just as a huge lightning bolt comes crashing into a mountain, cracking its stone surface into pieces. The word vihayas artham Iva may also be divided vihayasa artham Iva, meaning that the demon was flying in the sky on the cosmic path, vihayas, with the purpose of carrying off Balaram, who was his artham, or object of pursuit. Sa'ahata sapadi vishirna mastako mukhadviman rudhiram apasmrito sura Maharavam vyasurapatat samirayan giriryatha maghavata ayudhahata. Thus smashed by Balaram's fist, Pralamba's head immediately cracked open. The demon vomited blood from his mouth and lost all consciousness. And then with a great noise, he fell lifeless on the ground like a mountain devastated by Indra. Drishtra Pralamba nihitam balena balasalina gopasu vishmita asan sadhu sadviti vadina. The coward boys were most astonished to see how the powerful Balaram had killed the demon Pralamba, and they exclaimed, "Excellent, excellent! आशीषोभिगृह्णन्तस्तं प्रश प्रशस् 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 प्रशशमुसुस्तद् अर्हणं प्रेत्यगतम् इवालिङ्ग्य प्रेम jihvalachetasa. They offered Balaram profuse benedictions and then glorified him, who deserved all glorification. Their minds overwhelmed with ecstatic love, they embraced him as if he had come back from the dead. Pape pralambe nihate deva parama nirvrita abhyavarshan balam malyai sasam su sadhu sadviti. The sinful Pralamba, having been killed, the demigods felt extremely happy, and they showered flower garlands upon Lord Balaram and praised the excellence of his deed. Thus ends the purpose of the humble servants of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. To the 10th canto, 18th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Balaram Slays the Demon Pralamba. Wow. Swallowing the Forest Fire, Chapter 19. This chapter describes how Lord Krishna saved the cows and cowherd boys from a great fire in the Munjaranya forest. One day the cowherd boys became absorbed in sporting and allowed the cows to wander into a dense forest. Suddenly a forest fire blazed up, and to escape its flames the cows took refuge in a grove of sharp canes. When the cowherd boys missed their animals, they went searching for them, following their hoofprints and the trails of blades of grass and other plants they had trampled or had broken with their teeth. Finally, the boys found the cows and removed them from the cane forest. But by that time, the forest had grown strong and was threatening both the boys and the cows. Thus, the cowherd boys took shelter of Sri Krishna, the master of all mystic power, who told them to close their eyes. They did so, and in a moment he had swallowed up the fierce forest fire and brought them all back to Bandira tree, mentioned in the last chapter. Seeing this wonderful display of mystic potency, the cowherd boys thought Krishna must be a demigod, and they began to praise him. They all returned home. Shishukho vacha krida shakteshu gopeshu tadgava durucharini svairam charantyo vivishus trinalobhena gahvaram. Shukadeva Goswami said, while the cowherd boys were completely absorbed in playing, their cows wandered far away. They hungered for more grass, and with no one to watch them, they entered a dense forest. Ajagavo mahishyascha nirvishantyo vanadvanam ishikhatavim nirvivishu krandantyo davatarshita. Passing from one part of the great forest to another, the goats, cows, and buffalo eventually entered an area overgrown with sharp canes. The heat of a nearby forest fire made them thirsty, and they cried out in distress. Te pashyanta pashungopa Krishna Rama Dayatada Jatanu Tapadna Vidur Vichinvanto Gavam Gatim. Not seeing the cows before them, Krishna, Rama, and their cowherd friends suddenly felt repentant for having neglected them. The boys searched all around but could not discover where they had gone. Rinaistad kurat chinnair goshpader ankitair gavam margam anvagamam sarve nashta chivya vichetasa. Then the boys began tracing out the cow's path by noting their hoofprints and the blades of grass the cows had broken with their hooves and teeth. All the cowherd boys were in great anxiety because they had lost their source of livelihood. Munjatavyam Prashtamargam Krandamanam Swagodhanam Samprapya Trishta Shantas Tataste Sanyavartayan. Within the Munja forest, the coward boys finally found their valuable cows who had lost their way and were crying. Then the boys, thirsty and tired, herded the cows into the path back home. Ta'ahuta Bhagavata Mega Gambhiraya Gira Swanam Nam Nandam Shutva Pratinedhu Praharsita. The Supreme Personality God called out to the animals in a voice that resounded like a rumbling cloud. Hearing the sound of their own names, the cows were overjoyed and called out to the Lord in reply. Tata samanta davadumaketur yadrichaya bhutshaya krid vanokasam samirita sarathinol banol mukhair vile lihana stira jangaman mahan. Suddenly a great forest fire appeared on all sides, threatening to destroy all the forest creatures. Like a chariot driver, the wind swept the fire onward, and the terrible sparks shot in all directions. Indeed, the great fire extended its tongues of flames toward all moving and non-moving creatures. Just as Krishna, Balaram, and the coward boys were about to take the cows back home, the forest fire, previously mentioned, raged out of control and surrounded all of them. Tamapatantam paritodavangnim kopasagava prasamiksha bhita uchuscha krishnam sabalam prapanna yata harim mrityu bhayardita jana. As the cows and coward boys stared at the forest fire attacking them on all sides, they became fearful. The boys then approached Krishna and Balaram for shelter, just as those who were disturbed by fear of death approached the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The boys addressed them as follows. Krishna Krishna Mahavira He Rama Mogha Vikrama Tavagnina Dahyamanan Prapannam Tratum Arhata. The coward boy said, O Krishna, Krishna, most powerful one, O Rama, you whose prowess never fails, please save your devotees who are about to be burned by the forest fire and have come to take shelter of you. Nunam tvad bandhava Krishna nachad hantyavasaditum vayam hi sarva dharmajna tvan nathastvat parayana. Krishna, certainly your own friend shouldn't be destroyed. O knower of the nature of all things, we have accepted you as our Lord, and we are souls surrendered unto you. Shri Shukha Vacha Vacho Nishamya Kripanam Bandhunam Bhagavan Hari Nimilayata Ma Bhaishta Lochana Nitya Bhasata. Shukadev Goswami said, hearing these pitiful words from his friends, the Supreme Lord Krishna told them, just close your eyes and do not be afraid. This verse clearly reveals the simple, sublime relationship between Krishna and his pure devotees. The absolute truth, the Supreme Almighty Lord, is actually a young, blissful coward boy named Krishna. God is youthful and his mentality is playful. When he saw that his beloved friends were terrified of the forest fire, he simply told them to close their eyes and not be afraid. Then Lord Krishna acted as described in the next verse. Tateti militaksheshu bhagavan agnimulbanam pitvamukhena tan krichrad yogadisho yamochayat. Alright, the boys replied, and immediately closed their eyes. Then the Supreme Lord, the Master of all mystic power, opened his mouth and swallowed the terrible fire, saving his friends from danger. The coward boys were suffering from extreme fatigue, hunger, and thirst, and were about to be consumed by a horrible forest fire. All this is indicated here by the word krichrat. Tataschate Kshinyunmilya Punar Bhandiram Apita Nishamya Vishmita Asan Atmanam Gaschamo Chita. The cowherd boys opened their eyes and were amazed to find not only that they and the cows had been saved from the terrible fire, but that they had all been brought back to the Bhandira tree. Krishnasya yoga viryam tad yoga mayanubhavitam davagnir atmana kshemam vikshate me nire maram. When the cowherd boys saw that they had been saved from the forest fire by the Lord's mystic power, which is manifest by his internal potency, they began to think that Krishna must be a demigod. The cowherd boys of Vrindavan simply loved Krishna as their only friend and exclusive object of devotion. To increase their ecstasy, Krishna displayed to them his mystic potency and saved them from a terrible forest fire. The cowherd boys could never give up their ecstatic, loving friendship with Krishna, and therefore, rather than considering Krishna to be God after they saw his extraordinary power, they thought that perhaps he was a demigod. But since Lord Krishna was their beloved friend, they were on the same level with him, and thus they thought that they too must be demigods. In this way, Krishna's cowherd friends became overwhelmed with ecstasy. Dasanivartya sayahne saharamo janardana venum virannayan goshtam agar goped abhistuta. It was now late in the afternoon, and Lord Krishna, accompanied by Balaram, turned the cows back toward home. Playing his flute in a special way, Krishna returned to the cowherd village in the company of his cowherd friends, who chanted his glories. Gopinam Paramananda Asid Govinda Darshane Kshanam Yuga Satam Iva Yasam Yena Vina Bhavat. The young gopis took the greatest pleasure in seeing Govinda come home, since for them even a moment without his association seemed like 100 ages. After saving the cowherd boys from the blazing forest fire, Krishna saved the cowherd girls from the blazing fire of separation from him. The gopis headed by Srimati Radharani have the greatest love for Krishna, and even a single moment's separation from him seems like millions of years to them. The gopis are the greatest devotees of God, and their specific pastimes with Krishna will be described later in this work. Thus ends the purpose of the humble servant of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 10th canto, 19th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Swallowing Forest Fire. The rainy season and autumn in Vrindavan. To enhance the description of Lord Krishna's pastimes, Sri Shukadeva Goswami describes in this chapter the beauty of Vrindavan during autumn and the rainy season. In the course of his presentation, he gives various charming instructions in metaphorical terms. Wow. Sri Shukha Vacha Tayosad Adbhutam Karma Davagnir Moksham Atmana Gopastribhya Samachakyu Pralamba Vadham Evacha. Shukadeva Goswami said to the ladies of Vrindavan. The cowherd boys then related in full detail Lord Krishna's and Balaram's wonderful activities of delivering them from the forest fire and killing the demon Pralamba. Gopa Vridhascha Gopyascha Tad Upakarnya Vismita Menire Deva Pravaro Krishna Rama Vrajam Gato. The elder cowherd men and ladies were amazed to hear this account, and they concluded that Krishna and Balaram must be exalted demigods who had appeared in Vrindavan. Tata Pravartata Pravrit Sarva Sattva Samudbhava Vidyottamana Paridhir Vispurjita Nabhastala. Then the rainy season began, giving life and sustenance to all living beings. The sky began to rumble with thunder, and lightning flashed on the horizon. Sandra Nilambudair Vyoma Savidyut Stanayit Nubhi Aspasta Jyotir Achannam Brahmeva Sagunam Babho. The sky was then covered by the dense blue clouds, accompanied by lightning and thunder. Thus, the sky and its natural illumination were covered in the same way the spirit soul is covered by the three modes of material nature. Lightning is compared to the mode of goodness, and thunder to the mode of passion, and clouds to the mode of ignorance. Thus, the cloudy sky at the onset of the rainy season is analogous to the pure spirit soul when he becomes disturbed by the modes of nature. For at that time he is covered, and his original brilliant nature is only dimly reflected through the haze of these material qualities. Astamasan nipitamyad bhumyas chodamayam vaso sogobir muktam arebhe parjanya kala agate. With its rays, the sun had 8 months drunk up the earth's wealth in the form of water. Now that the proper time had arrived, the sun began releasing his accumulated wealth. The acharyas compared the sun's evaporating the earth's wealth of water to a king's collecting taxes. In chapter 20 of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada explains this analogy as follows. Clouds are accumulated water drawn from the land by the sunshine. Continually for 8 months, the sun evaporates all kinds of water from the surface of the globe, and this water is accumulated in the shape of clouds, which are distributed as water, and then when there is need. Similarly, a government exacts various taxes from the citizens, which the citizens are able to pay by their different material activities, agriculture, trade, and industry. The government can also exact taxes in the form of income taxes and sales taxes. This is compared to the sun withdrawing water from the earth. When there is again need of water on the surface of the globe, the same sunshine converts water into clouds and distributes it all over the globe. Similarly, the taxes collected by the government must be distributed to the people as educational work, public work, sanitation work, and so on. This is very essential for a good government. The government should not simply exact taxes for useless squandering. The tax collection should be utilized for public welfare of the state. Taridvanto mahamegas chandas vasana vepita prinanam jivanam yasya mumuchu karuna iva. Flashing with lightning, great clouds were shaken and swept about by fierce winds. Just like merciful persons, the clouds gave their lives for the pleasure of this world. Just as great compassionate personalities sometimes give their lives or wealth for the happiness of society, the rain clouds poured down their rain upon the parched earth. Although the clouds were thus dissipated, they freely provided rainfall for the happiness of the earth. In Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada comments as follows on this verse. During the rainy season, there are strong winds blustering all over the country and carrying clouds from one place to another to distribute water. When water is urgently needed after the summer season, the clouds are just like a rich man who in times of need distributes his money even by exhausting his whole treasury. So the clouds exhaust themselves by distributing water all over the surface of the globe. When Maharaj Dasharath, the father of Lord Ramchandra, used to fight with his enemies, it was said that he approached them just like a farmer, uprooting unnecessary plants and trees. And when there was need of giving charity, he used to distribute money exactly as the clouds distribute rain. The distribution of rain clouds is so sumptuous that it is compared to the distribution of wealth by a great munificent person. The clouds' downpour is so sufficient that the rains even fall on rocks and hills, on the oceans and seas where there is no need of water. A cloud is like a charitable person who opens his treasury for distribution and does not discriminate whether charity is needed or not needed. He gives in charity open-handedly. Metaphorically speaking, the lightning in the rain clouds is the light by which they see the distressed condition of the earth. And Blowing winds are the heavy breathing, such as found in the distressed person. Distressed to see the condition of the earth, the clouds tremble in the wind like a compassionate person. Thus they pour down the rain. Tapa Krisha Deva Midha Asid Varshiyasi Mahi Yathaiva Kamya Tapasas Tanusam Prapya Tat Phalam. The earth had been emaciated by the earth by the summer heat, but she became fully nourished again when moistened by the God of rain. Thus the earth was like a person whose body has been emaciated by austerities undergone for a material purpose, but who again becomes fully nourished when he achieves the fruit of those austerities. In Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada comments on this verse as follows. Before the rainfall, the whole surface of the globe becomes almost depleted of all kinds of energies and appears very lean. After the rainfall, the whole surface of the earth becomes green with vegetation and appears very healthy and strong. Here, a comparison is made to the person undergoing austerities for fulfillment of material desire. The flourishing condition of the earth after a rainy season is compared to the fulfillment of material desires. Sometimes when a country is subjugated by an undesirable government, persons and parties undergo severe penances and austerities to get control of the government. And when they attain control, they flourish by giving themselves general salaries. This is also like the flourishing of the earth and the rainy season. Actually, one should undergo severe austerities and penances only to achieve spiritual happiness. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is recommended that tapasya or austerity should be accepted only for realizing the Supreme Lord. By accepting austerity in devotional service, one regains his spiritual life. And as soon as one regains his spiritual life, he enjoys unlimited spiritual bliss. But if someone undertakes austerities and penances for some material gain, then as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the results are temporary and are desired only by persons of less intelligence. Nishamukeshu kadyotas tamasa bhanti nagraha yatha papena pasanda nahi veda kalau yuge. The evening twilight during the rainy season, the darkness allowed the glowworms, but not the stars, to shine forth, just as in the age of Kali, the predominance of sinful activities allows atheistic doctrines to overshadow the true knowledge of Vedas. Srila Prabhupada comments as follows. During the rainy seasons in the evening, there are many glowworms visible about the top of trees, hither and thither, and they glitter just like the lights. But the luminaries of the sky, the stars and moon, are not visible. Similarly, in the age of Kali, persons who are atheists or miscreants become very prominently visible, whereas persons who are actually following the Vedic principles for spiritual emancipation are practically obscured. This age, Kali Yuga, is compared to the cloudy season of the living entities. In this age, real knowledge is covered by the influence of the material advancement of civilization. The cheap mental speculators, atheists, and manufacturers of so-called religious principles become prominent like the glowworms, whereas persons strictly following the Vedic principles or scriptural injunctions become covered by clouds of this age. People should learn to take advantage of the actual luminaries of the sky, the sun, moon, and stars, instead of the glowworms' light. Actually, the glowworms cannot give any light in darkness of night. As clouds sometimes clear, even in the rainy season, and the moon and stars becomes visible, so even as in this Kali Yuga, there are sometimes advantages. The Vedic movement of Lord Chaitanya, the distribution of chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, is understood in this way. People seriously anxious to find real life should take advantage of this movement instead of looking toward the so-called light of mental speculators and atheists. Shrutva parjanyan ninadam manduka sasrujur gira tushnim sayana pragyadvad brahmana niyamatyaye. The frogs who had all been lying silent suddenly began croaking when they heard the rumbling of the rain clouds. In the same way, the Brahmana students who performed their morning duties in silence began reciting their lessons when called by their teachers. Srila Prabhupada comments, After the first rainfall, when there is a thundering sound in the clouds, all the frogs begin to croak. Like students suddenly engage in reading their studies. Students are generally supposed to rise early in the morning. They do not usually arise of their own accord, however, but only when there is bell sounded in the temple or in cultural institution. By the order of the spiritual master, they immediately rise, and after finishing their morning's duties, they sit down to study the Vedas or chant Vedic mantras. Similarly, everyone is sleeping in the darkness of Kali Yuga, but when there is a great Acharya, by his calling, only everyone takes to the study of the Vedas to acquire actual knowledge. Asan utpatya gaminya shudra nadyo nunushusyati humso yatha svatantrasya deha dravina sampada. With the advent of the rainy season, the insignificant streams which had become dry began to swell in the strait from their proper courses, like the body, property, and money of a man controlled by the urges of his senses. Srila Prabhupada comments, during the rainy season, many small ponds, lakes, and rivulets become filled with water, otherwise the rest of the year they remain dry. Similarly, materialistic persons are dry, but sometimes when they are in so-called opulent positions, with a home or children or a little bank balance, they appear to be flourishing, but immediately afterwards they become dry again, like small rivulets and ponds. The poet Vidyapati said that in the society of friends, family, children, wife, and so on, there is certainly some pleasure, but that pleasure is compared to a drop of water in the desert. Everyone is hankering after happiness, just as in the desert everyone is hankering after water. If in the desert there is a drop of water, it may of course be said that the water is there, but the benefit from the drop of water is very insignificant. In our materialistic way of life, which is just like a desert, we are hankering after an ocean of happiness, but in the form of society, friends, and mundane love, we are getting no more than a drop of water. Our satisfaction is never achieved as the small rivulets, lakes, and ponds are never filled with water in dry season. Harita haribhi saspayar indra gopaischa lohita uchilindra krita chaya nirnam shrir iva bhura bhut. The newly grown grass made the earth emerald green. The Indragopa insects added a reddish hue, and white mushrooms added further color and circles of shade. Thus the earth appeared like a person who has suddenly become rich. Srila Sridhar Swami comments that the word Nirnam indicates men of royal order. Thus the colorful display of dark green fields decorated with bright red insects and white mushroom umbrellas can be compared to a royal parade displaying the military strength of a king. Kshetrani shasya sampadbhi karshakarnam mudam dadhu maninam anutapam vai daivadhinam ajanatam. With their wealth of grains, the fields gave joy to the farmers, but those fields created remorse in the hearts of those who were too proud to engage in farming and who failed to understand how everything is under the control of the Supreme. It is common for people to live in large cities to become miserable and disgusted when there is ample rainfall. They do not understand or have forgotten that the rain is nourishing the crops they will eat. Although they certainly enjoy eating, they do not appreciate that with the rain, the Supreme Lord is feeding not only human beings but also plants, animals, and the earth itself. Modern, sophisticated people often look down their noses at those engaged in agricultural work. In fact, in American slang, a simple, unintelligent person is sometimes called a farmer. There are also government agencies that restrict agricultural production because certain capitalists fear the effect of market prices. Because of various artificial and manipulative practices in modern governments, we find widespread food shortages throughout the world, even in the United States, among the poverty-stricken, and at the same time we find governments paying farmers not to plant crops. Sometimes these governments throw huge amounts of food into the ocean. Thus, the administration of the arrogant and ignorant Those who are too proud to obey the laws of God or too ignorant to recognize them will always cause frustration among the people, whereas a God conscious government will provide abundance and happiness for all. Jalastalau kasha sarve navavari nishevaya abhibhran ruchiram rupam yata hari nishevaya. As all creatures on the land, of the land, and water took advantages of the newly fallen rainwater, their forms became attractive and pleasing, just as a devotee becomes beautiful by engaging in service of the Supreme Lord. Srila Prabhupada comments as follows. We have practical experience of this with our students in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Before becoming students, they were dirty looking, although they had naturally beautiful personal features. But due to having no information of Krishna consciousness, they appeared very dirty and wretched. Since they have taken to Krishna consciousness, their health has improved, and by following the rules and regulations, their bodily luster has increased. When they are dressed with saffron-colored cloth, with tilak on their foreheads and beads in their hands and on their necks, they look exactly as if they have come directly from Vaikuntha. Saridbhi sangata sindhus chukshobha swasanormiman apakva yoginas chittam kamaktam gunayug yatha. When the rivers joined the ocean and became agitated, its waves blown about by the wind, just as the mind of an immature yogi becomes agitated because he is still tainted by lust and attached to the objects of sense gratification. Girayo varshadhara bhir hanyamana na vivyatu abhibhuyamana yasanay yatha dokshaja chetasa. Just as devotees whose minds are absorbed in the personality of Godhead remain peaceful even when attacked by all sorts of dangers, the mountains in the rainy season are not at all disturbed by the repeated striking of the rain-bearing clouds. When splashed by torrents of rains, the mountains are not shaken. Rather, they are cleansed of dirt and become resplendent and beautiful. Similarly, an advanced devotee of the Supreme Lord is not shaken from his devotional program by disturbing conditions, which instead cleanse his heart of dust and of attachment to this world. Thus, the devotee becomes beautiful and resplendent by tolerating difficult conditions. In fact, a devotee accepts all reverses in life as the mercy of Lord Krishna, realizing that all suffering is due to the sufferer's own previous misdeeds. Marga bhuvu sandigdas tranayischana yasamskrita nabhyas yaman mana shrutayo dujay kalena chahata. During the rainy season, the roads not being cleansed become covered with grass and debris, and were thus difficult to make out. These roads were like religious scriptures that Brahmanas no longer study, and that thus become corrupted and covered over with the passage of time. Loka bandhus meghishu vidyutas chala saudhrida Stairyam na chakru kaminya purusheshu gunish viva. So the clouds are the well-wishing friends of all living beings. The lightning, fickle in its affinities, move from one group of clouds to another, like lusty women, unfaithful even to virtuous men. Srila Prabhupada comments, during the rainy season, lightning appears in one group of clouds and then immediately in another group of clouds. This phenomenon is compared to a lusty woman who does not fix her mind on one man. A cloud is compared to a qualified person because it pours rain and gives sustenance to many people. A man who is qualified similarly gives sustenance to many living creatures, such as family members or many workers in business. Unfortunately, his whole life can be disturbed by a wife who divorces him. When the husband is disturbed, the whole family is ruined. The children are dispersed on the business, or the business is closed, and everything is affected. It is therefore recommended that a woman desiring to advance in Krishna consciousness peacefully live with the husband, and that the couple not separate under any condition. The husband and the wife should control sex indulgent, and concentrate their mind on Krishna consciousness so their life may be successful. After all, in the material world, a man requires a woman, and a woman requires a man. When they are combined, they should live peacefully in Krishna consciousness, should not be restless like the lightning flashing from one group of clouds to another. Dhanur Vyati Mahindram Nirgunam Cha Guninyabhat Vyakte Guna Vyati Kare Gunavan Purusho Yatha. When the curved bow of Indra, the rainbow, appeared in the sky, which had the quality of thundering sound, it was unlike ordinary bows because it did not rest upon a string. Similarly, when the Supreme Lord appears in this world, which is the interaction of the material qualities, he is unlike ordinary persons because he remains free from all material qualities and independent of all material conditions. Srila Prabhupada comments as follows: sometimes, in addition to roaring thunder of the clouds, there is an appearance of a rainbow which stands as a bow without a string. Usually a bow stays in the curved position because it is tied at its two ends by the bowstring. But in the rainbow there is no such string, yet it rests in the sky so beautifully. Similarly, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead descends to his material world, he appears just like an ordinary human being, but he is not resting on any material condition. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he appears by his internal potency, which is freed from the bondage of external potency. What is bondage for the ordinary creature is freedom for the Personality of Godhead. Nararajudupaschanna Swajyotsna Rajitairganer Ahamatya Bhasitaya Swabhasa Puruso Yatha. During the rainy season, the moon was prevented from appearing directly by the covering of the clouds, which were themselves illuminated by the moon's rays. Similarly, the living being in material existence is prevented from appearing directly by the covering of the false ego, which is itself illuminated by consciousness of the pure soul. The analogy given here is excellent. During the rainy seasons, we cannot see the moon in the sky because the moon is covered by clouds. These clouds, however, are radiant with the glow of the moon's own rays. Similarly, in our conditioned material existence, we cannot directly perceive the soul because our consciousness is covered by false ego, which is the false identification with this material world and the material body. Yet, it is the soul's own consciousness that illuminates the false ego. As Gita describes, the energy of the soul is consciousness, and when this consciousness manifests through the screen of false ego, it appears as dull material consciousness, in which there is no direct vision of the soul or God. In the material world, even great philosophers ultimately resort to hazy ambiguities when speaking about the absolute truth. Just as the cloudy sky manifests only in a dull and indirect way the iridescent light of the moon. In material life, our false ego is often enthusiastic, hopeful, and apparently aware of various material affairs. And such consciousness encourages us to push on in material existence. But in truth, we are merely experiencing the dull reflection of our original pure consciousness, which is Krishna consciousness, direct perception of the soul and God, not realizing that the false ego merely hampers and dulls our real spiritual consciousness, which is fully enlightened and blissful. We mistakenly think that the material consciousness is full of knowledge and happiness. This is comparable to thinking that the luminous clouds are lighting up the night sky, while in fact it is moonshine that illuminates the sky, and the clouds that merely dull and hamper the moonshine. The clouds appear luminous because they are filtering and impeding the brilliant rays of the moon. Similarly, at times material consciousness appears pleasurable or enlightened because it is screening or filtering the original blissful enlightened consciousness coming directly from the soul. If we can understand the ingenious analogy given in this verse, we can easily advance in Krishna consciousness. Meghagamotsava Rishta Patyanandan Chikandina Griheshu tapta nirvinna yathachita janagame. The peacocks became festive and cried out a joyful greeting when they saw the clouds arrive, just as people distressed in household life feel pleasure when the pure devotees of the infallible Supreme Lord visit them. After the dry summer season, peacocks become jubilant with the arrival of the first thundering rain clouds, and thus they dance in great happiness. Srila Prabhupada comments, we have practical experience that many of our students were dry and morose previous to their coming to Krishna consciousness, but have come in contact with devotees. They are now dancing like jubilant peacocks. Pitvapa padapa padbhir asananam murtaya prakshamastapasa shanta yatha kamanu sevaya. The trees had grown thin and dry, but after they drank the newly fallen rainwater through their feet, their various bodily features blossomed. Similarly, one whose body has grown thin and weak from austerity again exhibits his healthy bodily features upon enjoying the material objects gained through that austerity. The words pada means foot and pa means drinking. The trees are called padapa because they drink through their roots, which are likened to feet. Upon drinking the newly fallen rainwater, the trees in Vrindavan began to manifest new leaves, sprouts, and blossoms, and they thus enjoy new growth. Similarly, materialistic persons often perform severe austerities to acquire the object of their desire. For example, politicians in America undergo grueling austerities while traveling about the countryside campaigning for election. Businessmen also will often deny personal comfort to make their business successful. Such austere persons, upon acquiring the fruits of their austerity, again become healthy and satisfied, like trees eagerly drinking rainwater after enduring the austerity of a dry, hot summer. Sarasva santarodhasu nyusur angapi sarasa griheshva santa krityeshu gramya iva durashaya. The cranes continued dwelling on the shores of the lakes, although the shores were agitated during the rainy season, just as materialistic persons with contaminated minds always remain at home, despite the many disturbances there. During the rainy season, there are often mudslides around the shores of lakes, and thorny bushes, stones, and other debris sometimes accumulate there. Despite all these inconveniences, ducks and cranes continue meandering through the lake shores. Similarly, innumerable painful occurrences are always disturbing family life. But a materialistic man never even considers leaving the family in the hands of his grown sons and going away from spiritual improvement. He regards such an idea as shocking and uncivilized because he is completely ignorant of the absolute truth and his relationship to that truth. Jaloghe nirabhidyanta setavo varshatishvare pasandinam asadvadair veda marga kalau yatha. When Indra set forth his rains, the flood waters broke through the irrigation dikes in the agricultural fields. Just as in the Kali Yuga, the atheist false theories break down the boundaries of Vedic injunctions. Vyamunchan vayubhir nunna bhutebhyas chamritam ghana yatha shisho vishpataya kale vijherita. The clouds, impelled by the winds, release their nectarian water for the benefit of all living beings, just as kings instructed by their Brahmana priests dispense charity to the citizens. Srila Prabhupada comments, in the rainy season, the clouds, tossed by the wind, deliver water that is welcomed like nectar. When the Vedic followers, the Brahmanas, inspire rich men like kings and the wealthy mercantile community to give charity in the performance of great sacrifices, the distribution of such wealth is also nectarian. The four sections of human society, namely the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras, are meant to live peacefully in a cooperative mood. This is possible when they are guided by expert Vedic Brahmanas who perform sacrifices and distribute wealth equally. Evam vanam tad varshishtham pakpa kharjura jambhumat Gogopalairritorantum sabala pravisadhari. When the Vrindavan forest had thus become resplendent, filled with ripe dates and jambu fruits, Lord Krishna, surrounded by his cows and cowherd boyfriends, accompanied by Sri Balaram, entered that forest to enjoy. Denavo mandagaminya udho bharena bhuyasa yayur bhagavata huta trutam pritya snutrastana. The cows had to move slowly because of their weighty milk bags, but they quickly ran to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as soon as he called them, their affection for him causing their udders to become wet. Srila Prabhupada comments, the cows being fed by new grasses became very healthy, and their milk bags were all very full. When Lord Krishna called them by name, they immediately came to him out of affection, and in their joyful condition, the milk flowed from their bags. Vanaukasa pramudita vanarachir madhur chitta jaladhara girer nadad asanna dadrishe guha. The Lord saw the joyful aborigine girls of the forest, the trees dripping sweet sap, and the mountain waterfalls whose resounding indicated that there were calves nearby. Kvachid vanaspati krodhe guyayam chabhavarshati nirvashya bhagavan reme kandamula falashana. When it rained, the Lord would sometimes enter a cave or hollow of a tree to play and to eat roots and fruits. Sri Sanatana Goswami explains that during the rainy season, bulbs and roots are very tender and palatable, and Lord Krishna would eat them along with wild fruits found in the forest. Lord Krishna and his young boyfriends would sit in the hollow of a tree or within a cave and enjoy pastimes while waiting for the rain to stop. Dadyodhanam samanitam Salayam Salilantike Sambhojaniyar Bhuje Gopai Shankar Shananvita. Lord Krishna would take his meal of boiled rice and yogurt sent from home in the company of Lord Sankarsana and the cowherd boys who regularly ate with him. They would all sit down to eat on a large stone near the water. Sadvalopari samvishya charvato milite kshanan triptan vrashan vatsataran gascha svodho bharashrama pravrit shriyam chatam vikshya sarvakala sukhavaham bhagavan pujyam chakre atma shaktya upabhrit Lord Krishna watched the contented bulls, calves, and cows sitting on the green grass and grazing with closed eyes, and he saw that the cows were tired from the burden of their heavy milk bags. Thus, observing the beauty and opulence of Vrindavan's rainy season, a perennial source of great happiness, the Lord offered all respect to that season, which was expanded from his all internal potency. The lush beauty of the rainy season on Vrindavan is meant to enhance the pleasure pastimes of Sri Krishna. Thus, to set the scene for the Lord's loving affairs, his internal potency makes all the arrangements described in this chapter. Evam nivas satos tasmin Rama Keshavayor Vraje Sharat Sambhavat Vyabhra Swacham Vaparushalina. While Lord Rama and Lord Keshava were thus dwelling in Vrindavan, the fall season arrived, and when the sky is cloudless, the water cleared, and the wind gentle. Sarada nirajotpatya nirani prakritim yayu Brahstanam iva chetamsi punar yogi nishevaya. The autumn season which regenerated lotus flower also restored the various bodies of water to their original purity, just as the process of devotional service purifies the minds of the fallen yogis when they return to it. Yomnyo Brahambhuta Shabalyam Uva Pankam Apamalam Sarajahara Shraminam Krishne Bhakti Yatha Shubham. Autumn cleared the sky of clouds, let the animals get out of their crowded living conditions, cleaned the earth of its covering of mud, and purified water of contamination. In the same way that loving service rendered to Lord Krishna frees the members of the four spiritual orders from their respective troubles. Every human being must perform the prescribed duties corresponding to one of the four spiritual orders of life. These divisions are 1. Celibate student life, brahmacharya, married life, grahastha, retired life, vanaprastha, and renounced life, sannyas. The brahmachari must perform many menial duties during his student life, but as he becomes advanced in loving service to Krishna, his superiors recognize his spiritual status and elevate him to higher duties. The innumerable obligations performed on behalf of wife and children constantly harass a householder, but as he becomes advanced in loving service to Krishna, he is automatically elevated by the laws of nature to more enjoyable spiritual occupation, and he somehow minimizes material duties. Those in the vanaprastha, or retired order of life, also perform many duties, and these can also be replaced by ecstatic loving service to Krishna. Similarly, renounced life has many natural difficulties, not the least of which is that sannyasis or renounced men are inclined to meditate on the impersonal aspect of the absolute truth, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 12.5. Kleshodikataras tesham avyakta sakta chetasam. For those whose minds are attached to the unmanifest and impersonal feature of the Lord, advancement is exceedingly painful. But as soon as a sannyasi takes to preaching the glories of Krishna, in every town and village, his life becomes blissful sequence of blissful spiritual realizations. Wow. In the autumn season, the sky returns to its natural blue color. The vanishing of the clouds is like the vanishing of the troublesome beauties in brahmachari life. Just after summer comes the rainy season, when the animals sometimes become disturbed by the torrential storms and thus huddle together, but the autumn season signals the time for the animals to go to their respective areas and live more peacefully. This represents a householder's becoming free from harassment of family duties and being able to devote more of his time to spiritual responsibilities, which are the real goal of life, both for himself and his family. The removal of the muddy layer of the earth is like the removal of the inconveniences of vanaprastha life, and the purification of the water is the sanctification of sannyas life, by once preaching the glories of Krishna without sex desire. Sarvasvam jalada hitva vireju subra varchasa yathatya tai shana shanta munayo mukta kilbisha. The clouds, having given up all they possess, shone forth with purified effulgence, just like peaceful sages who have given up material desires and are thus free of all sinful propensities. When the clouds are filled with water, they are dark and cover the sun's rays, just as the material mind of a impure man covers the soul shining within. But when the clouds pour down the rain, they become white and then brilliantly reflect the shining sun. Just as a man who gives up all material desires and sinful propensities become purified and then brilliantly reflect his own soul and the supreme soul within. Giriyo mumuchu stoyam vachinna mumuchu shivam yatha jnanamritam kale jnanino dadate nava. During this season, the mountains sometimes release their pure water, sometimes did not, just as the experts in transcendental science sometimes give the nectar of transcendental knowledge and sometimes do not. The first part of this chapter describes the rainy season, and the second part has been dealing with the autumn season, which begins when the rain stops. During the rainy season, water always flows from the mountains, but during the autumn, the water sometimes flows, sometimes does not. Similarly, great saintly teachers sometimes speak extensively on spiritual knowledge, sometimes they are silent. The self-realized soul is closely in touch with the Supreme Soul, and according to his desire, are competent spiritual scientists. And according to his desires, a competent spiritual scientist may or may not describe the absolute truth, depending on the specific circumstances. Naiva vidan shiyamanan jalam gada jale chara yathayur anvaham kshayam naramudha kutumbina. The fish swimming in the increasingly shallow water did not at all understand that the water was diminishing, just as foolish family men cannot see how the time they have left to live is diminishing with every passing day. After the rainy season, the water gradually goes down, but stupid fish do not understand this. Thus, they are often stranded on the lake shores and riverbanks. Similarly, those infatuated with family life do not understand that the remainder of their life is constantly decreasing. Thus, they fail to perfect their Krishna consciousness and are stranded in the cycle of birth and death. Gadhavari charastapam avindan charad arkajam yatha daridra kripana kutumbya avijitendriya. Just as a miserly, poverty-stricken person overly absorbed in family life suffers because he cannot control his senses, the fish swimming in the shallow water had to suffer the heat of the autumn sun. Although, as described in the previous verse, unintelligent fish are not aware of the diminishing water, one may think these fish are still happy according to the old proverb, ignorance is bliss, but even the ignorant fish are scorched by the autumn sun. Similarly, although an attached family man may consider his ignorance of spiritual life blissful, he is constantly disturbed by the problems of family life, and indeed, his uncontrolled senses lead him into a situation of unrelieved anguish. Shanai shanai jahu pankham sthalanyamam cha virudha ythaham mamatam dhira sarir shariradishvanatmasu. Gradually, the different areas of land gave up their muddy condition, and the plants grew past their unripe stage in the same way that sober sages give up egotism and possessiveness. These are based on things different from real self, namely the material body and its byproducts. The word adishu in this verse indicates the byproducts of the body, such as children, home, and wealth. Nishchalambur abhut trishnim samudra sharad agame atmanyuparate samyan Bhunirvyuparatagama. With the arrival of autumn, the ocean and the lakes become silent, and their waters still, just like a sage who has desisted from all material activities and given up his recitation of Vedic mantras. One recites ordinary Vedic mantras for material promotion, mystic power, and impersonal salvation. But when a sage is completely free of personal desire, he vibrates the transcendental glories of the Supreme Lord exclusively. Kedaredbhyastva grihnan karshaka drida setubhi yatha prane sravaj jnanam tannirodhena yogina. In the same way that the practitioners of yoga bring their senses under strict control to check their consciousness from flowing out through the agitated senses, the farmers erected strong mud banks to keep the water within their rice fields from draining out. Srila Prabhupada comments, in autumn, farmers save the water within the fields by building strong walls so that the water contained within the field cannot run out. There is hardly any hope for new rainfall. Therefore, they want to save whatever is in the field. Similarly, a person who is actually advanced in self-realization protects his energy by controlling his senses. It is advised that after the age of 50, one should retire from family life and conserve the energy of the body for utilization in the advancement of Krishna consciousness. Unless one is able to control the senses and engage them in transcendental loving service of Mukunda, there is no possibility of salvation. Sharad Arkam Sujam Stapan Bhutanam Udupo Harat Deha Bhimana Jam Bodho Mukundo Vraja Yoshitam. The autumn moon relieved all creatures of the suffering caused by the sun's rays, just as wisdom relieves a person of the misery caused by his identifying with his material body, and as Lord Mukunda relieves Vrindavan ladies of distress caused by their separation from him. Kam ashobhata nirmegham sharad vimala tarakam sattva yuktam yatha chittam shabda brahmartha darshanam. Free of clouds and filled with clearly visible stars, the autumn sky shone brilliantly, just like the spiritual consciousness of one who has directly experienced the purport of the Vedic scriptures. The clear and starry autumn sky can also be compared to the pure heart of the devotee. The spiritual nature is always brilliant, clean and blissful, and this spiritual nature called Vaikuntha immediately satisfies all the desires of the soul. This is the secret of Krishna consciousness. Akhanda mandalo vyomni rara jodu ganeshashi yathaya dupati krishno vrishni chakravrito bhuvi. The full moon shone in the sky, surrounded by stars, just as Sri Krishna, the Lord of the Yadu dynasty, shone brilliantly on the earth, surrounded by all Vrishnis. Sri Sanatana Goswami explains that in Vrindavan, the full moon is eternally risen, and this full moon is like the full manifestation of the absolute truth, Sri Krishna, when he was manifest on earth. Lord Krishna was surrounded by prominent members of the Vrishni dynasty, such as Nanda, Upananda, Vasudeva, and Akrura. Aslishya sama sitoshnam prashuna vanam marutam janastapam jahur gopya na Krishna hita chetasa. Except for the gopis whose hearts had been stolen by Krishna, the people could forget their suffering by embracing the wind coming from the flowerful forest. This wind was neither hot nor cold. Gavo mriga khaga narya pushpinya saradad bhavan anviyamana svavrishay phala isha kriya iva. By the influence of the autumn season, all the cows, doe, women, and female birds became fertile and were followed by their respective mates in search of sexual enjoyment, just as activities performed for the service of the Supreme Lord are automatically followed by all beneficial results. Srila Prabhupada comments, on the arrival of the autumn season, all the cows, deers, birds, and females in general become pregnant, because in that season, generally, all the husbands become impelled by sex desire. This is exactly like the transcendentalists who, by the grace of the Supreme Lord, are bestowed with the benediction of their destinations in life. Srila Rupa Goswami is instructed in his Upadeshamrita that one should perform devotional service with great enthusiasm, patience, and conviction, and should follow the rules and regulations, keep oneself clean from material contamination, and stay in association with devotees. By following these principles, one is sure to achieve the desired result of devotional service. For he who patiently follows the regulative principles of devotional service, the time will come when he will achieve the result, as the wives reap results by becoming pregnant. Udahrisyan varijani shuryothane kumudvina rajñatu nirbhaya loka yatha dasyun nripa. O King Parikshit, when the autumn sun rose, all the lotus flowers blossomed happily except the night blooming kumut. Just as in the presence of a strong ruler, everyone becomes fearless except the thieves. पुरग्रामेष्वग्रयणैर् इन्द्रियश्च महोत्सवै बभौ भूपक्वशस्याद्या kalabhyam nitaram hare. In all the towns and villages, people held great festivals performing Vedic fire sacrifice for honoring and tasting the first grains of the new harvest, along with similar celebrations that followed local custom and tradition. Thus, the earth, rich with newly grown grain and especially beautified by the presence of Krishna and Balaram, shone beautifully as an expansion of the Supreme Lord. The word agrayane refers to a particular authorized Vedic sacrifice, and the word indriya refers to folk ceremonies that have somewhat worldly objectives. Srila Prabhupada comments as follows: during autumn, the fields become filled with ripened grains. At that time, people become happy over the harvest and observe various ceremonies such as Navanna, the offering of new grains to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The new grains are first offered to the deities in various temples, and all are invited to take sweet rice with these new grains. There are other religious ceremonies and methods of worship, particularly in Bengal, where the greatest of all such ceremonies is held, called Durga Puja. Vanin Munin Nirpasnata Nirga Yarthan Prapedire Vasharuddha Yatha Siddha Swapindan Kala Agate. The merchants, sages, kings, and brahmachari students kept in by the rain were at last free to go out and attain their desired objects. Just as those who achieve perfection in this life, when the proper time comes, leave the material body and attain their respective forms. Srila Prabhupada comments, in Vrindavan, the autumn season was very beautiful then because of the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna and Balaram. The mercantile community, the royal order, and the sages were free to move to achieve their desired benedictions. Similarly, the transcendentalists, when freed from engagement of the material body, also achieved the desired goal. During the rainy seasons, the mercantile community cannot move from one place to another, and so do not get their desired profit. Nor can the royal order go from one place to another to collect taxes from the people. As for saintly persons who must travel to preach transcendental knowledge, they also are restrained by the rainy season. But during the autumn, all of them leave their confines. In the case of the transcendentalist, be he a jnani, a yogi, or a devotee, because of the material body, he cannot actually enjoy spiritual achievement. But as soon as he gives up the body, or after death, the jnani merges into spiritual effulgence of the Supreme Lord. The yogi transfers himself to the various high planets, and devotees goes to the planet of the Supreme Lord, Golok Vrindavan, or the Vaikunthas, and thus enjoys his eternal spiritual life. Thus ends the purpose of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 10th canto, 20th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Rainy Season and Autumn in Vrindavan. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Thai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari.